In the stillness of the morning, the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, his gaze steady and serene. Disciples gathered around him, their hearts heavy with questions, seeking solace in the Enlightened One's words. Among them, a young man approached, his expression troubled, his soul burdened with a profound sense of emptiness. "Master," the young man began, his voice trembling, "I have achieved many things. Yet I feel an insatiable void within me." The Buddha's compassionate eyes rested on the man, and he nodded, inviting him to continue his lament. "No matter what I do, no matter what I acquire, the emptiness persists." Deep and unyielding, the man confessed. The Buddha's voice emerged, calm and gentle. "Tell me, young one, what do you believe will fill this void you speak of?" The man hesitated, searching for words that could express his aching heart's longing. But he remained uncertain. "Is it wealth, power, love, or recognition that you seek? Each is a fleeting shadow, elusive and insubstantial," the Buddha said. The man's eyes filled with uncertainty as he replied, "I seek fulfillment, Master, a sense of wholeness that others seem to possess with ease." The Buddha motioned for the man to sit closer, speaking with unyielding clarity. "Fulfillment is not found in possessions, nor in the praise of others, nor in the pursuit of fleeting pleasures," he continued. "True fulfillment arises from within, when one recognizes the impermanence of desire and the boundless potential of the present moment." The young man lowered his gaze. Confusion etched on his features, as he sought to grasp the Buddha's profound words. "But how, Master? How does one escape the trap of endless desires and the ache of emptiness?" he asked. The Buddha's gaze shifted to a distant field where laborers worked diligently, their movements harmonious with the earth's rhythm. "Observe them," the Buddha said. "Their simplicity is their treasure, their connection to life unbroken by the chains of ambition." The man watched the laborers, noting their faces, unmarked by the anguish he carried within himself. The Buddha spoke again, his voice steady. "Fulfillment cannot be pursued. It must be nurtured through understanding, gratitude, and the release of incessant craving." The man's attention returned to the Buddha as he listened with unwavering focus, his soul yearning for clarity. "Let me share a story that may guide you toward the understanding you seek," the Buddha began. His disciples leaned in, eager to hear the timeless wisdom that would pour forth from the Enlightened One. In a distant kingdom, there lived a beggar who wandered the land, his possessions scarce, his joy abundant, the Buddha said. This beggar was shunned by the wealthy, dismissed as insignificant, yet he bore a smile that shone brighter than gold. The young man's curiosity grew as the Buddha's words painted vivid images in his mind, drawing him deeper into the tale. One day, a king, weighed down by riches and sorrow, encountered the beggar and envied his cheerfulness, the Buddha recounted. The king approached the beggar, seeking the secret to his happiness, hoping to free himself from his own despair. The Buddha paused, allowing the disciples to absorb the essence of the story, their breaths quiet and measured. The beggar replied, "I own nothing but my freedom from want, and in that freedom, I find true happiness," the Buddha said. The king, bewildered, offered the beggar all his treasures, his palace, and his lands in exchange for his joy. The young man's brow furrowed as he awaited the beggar's response, his heart yearning for the key to his own emptiness. The beggar declined, saying, "I do not desire your riches, for I am already rich in contentment," the Buddha revealed. The king realized that his sorrow was born not of his possessions but of his relentless craving for more. The disciples murmured among themselves, reflecting on the wisdom embedded in the Buddha's tale, its truths resonating deeply. The Buddha's voice softened. Fulfillment is not a thing to be acquired. It is a state of being, free from attachment and comparison. The young man nodded slowly, the weight of the story settling into his consciousness. Its lessons undeniable. The Buddha spoke directly to the young man. His words deliberate and clear. Your emptiness is not a void to be filled but a mirror to reveal the impermanence of desire. He continued, release your attachment to what you believe you must possess, and you will uncover the boundless joy of the present moment. The man's chest rose and fell as he breathed deeply, his understanding beginning to take root. Fragile yet potent. Master, the man asked, how does one begin the journey of releasing this relentless craving and embracing the moments? Treasure? The Buddha replied, start by observing the nature of your desires. Are they born of fear, greed, or comparison? He elaborated, reflect on their fleeting nature, their transient hold on your heart, and you will see their impermanence. The Buddha's disciples nodded in agreement, their faith in the teachings unwavering, their hearts anchored in the truth. Cultivate gratitude for what you already possess, the air you breathe, the love that surrounds you, the simplicity of existence, the Buddha advised. Gratitude is the soil in which fulfillment grows, nurturing the soul and dissolving the ache of wanting, the Buddha continued. Practice giving, not for recognition, but for the joy of sharing, and you will discover connection beyond measure, he said. The young man listened intently, his spirit lifted by the wisdom imparted, his emptiness dimming. The Buddha concluded, meditate upon the impermanence of all things, for in understanding transience, you will embrace the eternal now. He added, the present moment is the gateway to fulfillment, untainted by past regret or future yearning. The young man bowed before the Buddha, his soul lighter than when he arrived, his path illuminated. The disciples sat in silence, their hearts filled with gratitude, their minds absorbed in the clarity of the teachings. The Buddha's voice, unwavering and kind, resonated among the disciples, guiding them to live without attachment. The young man returned to his life, carrying the Buddha's wisdom as a lantern to light his way. In the quiet of the garden, the Buddha's teachings lingered, their truths timeless, their impact boundless. The disciples departed, their minds filled with the lessons of the day, their spirits enriched. The Buddha remained under the Bodhi tree, his presence serene, his wisdom infinite, his compassion enduring. Another day, another gathering of disciples under the Bodhi tree. As the sun cast its gentle rays across the garden, the Buddha sat in calm repose, his gaze serene as he observed the faces of those seeking his wisdom. Among them, a man stepped forward, his expression conflicted, his hands trembling with the weight of an untold burden. Master, he said, his voice heavy with emotion, my heart is torn between ambition and contentment, and I feel lost. The Buddha's eyes rested on the man, his presence like a still lake reflecting the turmoil of the seeker's soul. Speak, young one, the Buddha replied, his voice a balm to the man's restlessness. What troubles your heart so deeply? The man knelt before the Buddha, struggling to find words that could encapsulate the storm within him. I desire greatness, he began, his voice faltering, yet I fear that in seeking it, I lose the essence of who I am. The Buddha inclined his head, listening intently as the man laid bare his inner conflict, his doubts flowing like a river. I have achieved much already, the man continued, but the more I gain, the more I feel the emptiness grow. The Buddha's voice emerged, steady and compassionate. The path of desire is an unending road, one that offers mirages but no true destination. He added, greatness is not measured by accumulation but by the harmony of one's actions with the truth of one's being. The man's gaze faltered as he struggled to reconcile his ambition with the Buddha's words of wisdom. Master, he asked, how does one distinguish between noble aspirations and the craving that leads only to suffering? The Buddha paused, allowing the question to settle among the gathered disciples. Their breaths unified in anticipation. Let me share with you the story of a wise but restless prince who sought fulfillment beyond his kingdom. The Buddha began. The disciples leaned forward, their attention unwavering as the Enlightened One wove a tale of profound meaning. In a distant realm, a prince lived with all the luxuries his heart could desire. Yet a void gnawed at his soul. The man listened intently as the Buddha's words painted the prince's life with vivid clarity, each detail laden with purpose. Despite his wealth, the prince felt a longing for something more, a greatness that he believed lay beyond his palace. The Buddha continued. He left his kingdom to seek wisdom, wandering through foreign lands, driven by an unquenchable thirst for meaning. The disciples nodded, their understanding of the prince's struggles reflected in their own experiences and aspirations. In his wanderings, the prince encountered a sage who lived in a humble hut, content and serene in his simplicity. The Buddha said. The prince asked the sage, "What is the secret to your peace? While I, with all my riches, feel restless?" The man before the Buddha leaned closer, captivated by the prince's search for answers that mirrored his own inner quest. The sage replied, "Your restlessness comes from chasing shadows of fulfillment, mistaking the fleeting for the eternal." The Buddha recounted. The prince, bewildered, asked, "How do I recognize what is eternal amidst the distractions of life?" The Buddha paused, his voice imbued with the weight of the story's wisdom. Before continuing, the sage smiled and said, "The eternal is not found in the pursuit of more, but in the surrender to less." The disciples murmured softly, reflecting on the sage's cryptic yet profound words, their hearts stirred by the tale's resonance. The prince, humbled by the sage's wisdom, realized that his quest for greatness was fueled by an insatiable craving. The Buddha said. He returned to his kingdom with a changed heart, dedicating his life to serving others, finding joy in their welfare. The man before the Buddha lowered his head, the story's meaning settling deeply into his consciousness. The Buddha's voice softened, addressing the man directly. Aspiration becomes noble when it is free from attachment and rooted in compassion for all beings. He continued, "Greatness lies not in elevating oneself above others but in uplifting those who are burdened, sharing your light freely." The man's heart quivered with the weight of understanding, his doubts beginning to dissolve like mist at sunrise. "Master," the man asked, "how can I transform my restless ambition into a force that serves the greater good?" The Buddha replied, "Begin by observing the intentions behind your aspirations. Are they born of fear, pride, or genuine compassion?" He elaborated, "Examine their nature without judgment, and you will begin to see which lead to suffering and which to peace. Cultivate humility," the Buddha advised, "for a humble heart is a fertile ground for the seeds of noble action." He added, "Practice generosity, not as a means to gain but as a way to release the chains of self-centeredness." The disciples nodded in agreement, their minds absorbing the clarity of the Buddha's guidance, their spirits buoyed by its simplicity. "Turn your gaze inward," the Buddha said, "for the answers you seek lie not in the world but within your own awareness." The man before him felt his chest expand with a newfound lightness. The Buddha's words a lantern dispelling the shadows of doubt. "Meditate on the impermanence of all things, for in transience, you will find the eternal nature of fulfillment." The garden fell silent, the disciples immersed in the quiet profundity of the Buddha's teachings, their breaths steady and calm. The Buddha's voice resonated through the stillness, his words echoing in the hearts of those gathered under the Bodhi tree. The restless heart finds peace not in grasping but in releasing, not in striving but in being, the Buddha concluded. The man bowed deeply before the Buddha, his soul lighter than when he had arrived. The burden of his conflict eased. The disciples dispersed, their hearts filled with gratitude, their minds carrying the lessons imparted by the Enlightened One. In the tranquility of the garden, The Buddha's presence remained, a beacon of wisdom and compassion for all who sought it. Another day, another sunrise graced the garden at Jetavana, as disciples gathered in quiet anticipation of the Buddha's teachings. The Enlightened One sat under the Bodhi tree, his serene presence radiating peace and wisdom, guiding all who sought clarity. Among the gathering, a woman approached, her face etched with sorrow, her spirit weighed down by a profound sense of loss. "Master," she began, her voice trembling, "I have lost the love of my life, and my heart feels shattered beyond repair." The Buddha's compassionate eyes met hers, and he gestured for her to sit, inviting her to share her pain. "Grief is a powerful force," he said softly, "but it holds the potential for transformation, if you allow it to guide you." The woman's tears flowed freely as she confessed her anguish, her hands clasped tightly as though seeking solace in the Buddha's words. "I cannot move forward, Master," she said, her voice strained. "The emptiness consumes me, and I see no end to my suffering." The Buddha listened intently, his silence offering the space for her emotions to unfold without judgment. "Loss is a natural part of existence," the Buddha said, his voice gentle, "but it is through loss that we discover impermanence." He continued, "Clinging to what is gone only deepens the void, but embracing the transient nature of life brings peace." The woman nodded faintly, her grief still raw but her heart yearning for the wisdom that would ease her pain. "Let me share with you a story that may help illuminate the path through your sorrow," the Buddha began. The disciples leaned closer, their breaths hushed, their minds open to the timeless truths embedded in the Enlightened One's tales. In a small village, there lived a widow who mourned the passing of her beloved husband. Her days overshadowed by despair, the woman listened intently, the Buddha's words painting vivid images that resonated deeply with her own experience of loss. She carried his belongings with her everywhere, clutching them tightly as though they were her lifeline to the past, the Buddha said. One day, she encountered a wise old monk who observed her burden and offered her a chance for healing. The disciples exchanged quiet murmurs, reflecting on the depth of the widow's sorrow and the possibility of transformation through wisdom. The monk said, "Give me one item of your husband's, and I will guide you to peace," the Buddha recounted. The widow hesitated, fearing that releasing even one possession would sever her connection to the love she had lost. The woman before the Buddha felt her chest tighten, the widow's pain striking a chord within her own grieving heart. After much thought, the widow reluctantly gave the monk her husband's scarf. Her fingers trembling as she released it, the Buddha continued. The monk smiled and said, "With every item you release, you free yourself from the chains of your sorrow." The disciples nodded solemnly, understanding the truth embedded in the monk's simple yet profound words. Their hearts stirred by the story's resonance. The widow began to let go, piece by piece, her burden lightening as she embraced the impermanence of her possessions, the Buddha said. She discovered that her love was not bound to objects but lived on in the kindness she extended to others. The woman before the Buddha wiped her tears, the story's meaning settling deeply into her consciousness. Its lessons undeniable. Grief does not define you, the Buddha said gently. It is a teacher, guiding you to see the impermanence of all things. He continued, release your attachment to what is lost, and you will uncover the strength within to transform sorrow into compassion. The woman's heart quivered as she listened, her anguish beginning to dissolve, replaced by the faint flicker of understanding. Master, she asked, how can I begin to release this pain that feels so entwined with my being? The Buddha replied, start by observing your grief without judgment, allowing it to flow without resistance or denial. He elaborated, meditate on the nature of your pain, seeing its impermanence, and you will find peace in its transient presence. The disciples nodded, their minds absorbing the clarity of the Buddha's guidance. their spirits buoyed by its simplicity. Cultivate gratitude for the love you shared, for it is a treasure that exists beyond the boundaries of time, the Buddha advised. Practice compassion for others who mourn, for in giving comfort, you will find solace in your own heart, the Buddha added. Turn your gaze inward, for the answers to your grief lie within your own awareness and not in the world outside. The garden fell silent, the disciples immersed in the quiet profundity of the Buddha's teachings, their breaths steady and calm. The Buddha's voice resonated through the stillness, his words echoing in the hearts of those gathered under the Bodhi tree. Healing comes not from forgetting but from transforming pain into a source of wisdom and compassion, the Buddha concluded. The woman bowed deeply before the Buddha, her soul lighter than when she had arrived. The burden of her sorrow eased, the disciples dispersed, their hearts filled with gratitude, their minds carrying the lessons imparted by the Enlightened One. In the tranquility of the garden, the Buddha's presence remained, a beacon of wisdom and compassion for all who sought it. Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.